Hi, I'm Mark Carpel. I'm on the board of Northampton Neighbors, and I'm one of the group of people that puts the speaker series together. Before I introduce today's speakers, I want to say a word about Northampton Neighbors, share a coming attraction, and explain the logistics for today's talk. Northampton Neighbors launched a little over 3 years ago. We're a member-based nonprofit offering volunteer services, programs, and events to people who want to continue living independent, engaged lives in their homes and communities with a little neighborly help. By the time COVID-19 arrived, we had delivered 1,700 services to our now 950 members and provided a variety of ways to socialize with other members. Anyone, anywhere can become a member of Northampton Neighbors. Those who are over 55 and live in Northampton can receive services. And there are no fees or charges for joining Northampton Neighbors or receiving services, which is extremely rare in organizations like ours. During COVID-19, we had to stop delivering in-person services out of concern for the safety of our members and volunteers. But we have neighborhood circles meeting remotely around the city and in Florence, as well as special interest groups and the speaker series. We make regular calls to members who feel isolated. Members can get remote tech help, and we hope to begin safely offering in-person services again in the very near future. In 2 weeks, we'll have the last talk of the season. We catch our breath over the summer and then gear up again in September. On Friday, May 21st, Jennifer Restucci will give a talk entitled Home Sweet Home, Keeping It Sweet as We Age. We hope you'll join us for that event. Now a word about the logistics for today's talk. This talk will be recorded and uploaded to Northampton Neighbors YouTube channel, as we've done with all of our talks since COVID started. We sometimes include a little footage of our viewers, especially during the Q&A. We're letting you know that, and by staying on Zoom with us, you're telling us that's okay with you. I've been told that the best way for you to view this would be on speaker view, and you have that option in the upper right of your screen where you can go gallery or speaker view. Speaker view is the preferable way to watch it. Nina Kleinberg, the wizard of Zoom, will mute you during Jane and Michael's talk. They'll talk for about 30 minutes. You can send them questions for the Q&A by typing them into the chat feature, which is at the middle bottom of your screen. When Jane and Michael are finished, I'll read the questions for them to answer. If we get through all of those questions and still have some time, we'll invite you to wave your hand, unmute yourself, and you can ask your question out loud. Finally, if your sound isn't great or if you have difficulty hearing, you may be seeing already a simultaneous translation, a simultaneous printing out of what's being spoken. If you don't want that, you can eliminate that by going down to the CC button, which is at the bottom of your screen, a little bit to the right, and you can say hide that. But if you want that, you can view it during the talk, and you can keep a transcript of the whole talk when it's over. So today we have two speakers representing the Movement Voter Project. I think of them and their colleagues as democracy's superheroes. And at a time when voting rights are under attack across the country, there has never been a greater need for them. Jane Lerner is a writer, editor, and political organizer who lives in New York. And to give you a sense of her range, Jane has produced and created content for Rockefeller Center, Red Bull, YouTube, the Guggenheim Museum, Coachella, and the City of New York. As a journalist, she's been published by NPR, New York Post, Time Out, New York Magazine, and dozens more. Her concentration has always been on social justice issues, music and culture, food, travel, and underground art. She is also the organizer of BK Swappers, a Brooklyn-based larder, swap, and food community gathering. She joined Movement Voter Project, where she is now a donor advisor and regional donor organizer in early 2019. The 2016 election galvanized her to not only be more generous in her own giving, but inspired her to motivate others to do the same. Jane works to fundraise major donors across the country and coordinates closely with what she describes as, quote, the amazing local MVP team in Western Massachusetts. And representing that local team is Michael Kane. Separately from Movement Voter Project, Michael has 30 years experience in economic and workforce development as a practitioner and consultant on the national, state, and neighborhood level. He was involved in the development of more than 20 strategic economic development plans, including those for Greater Hartford, Santa Fe, Los Alamos, and Rio Arriba counties in New Mexico, and the Pittsburgh Community Development System. He and his colleagues have prepared reports and plans for what is called the creative economy, which taps the income-producing potential of creative activities and ideas. And they've prepared them for Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, the Piedmont region of North Carolina, Washington, D.C., New York City, and the Berkshires, among others. Michael became actively involved with Movement Voter Project a year and a half ago and has been a member of the Western Mass team that organized nearly 100 in-person and virtual house parties and raised close to $1 million to support the work of MVP's grassroots partners nationally in the 2020 election. Michael and I got to know each other when he rented an office down the hall from mine on Main Street, and he's been a delight to have as a neighbor. So Michael and Jane, take it away.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mark, for the invitation initially. Thanks for helping us navigate our way through the Northampton Neighbors Speaker Series. Nina, thank you as well for your tech help. Thanks to the planning committee, and also thanks to you guys who are giving up a Friday afternoon to be here and hear from us. So we're going to do two things, as Mark said. Jane is going to start off by talking about National MVP, some of its successes, its strategy, and what's in store for the 2022 elections, 2024 presidential elections, and beyond. And then I'll come back in to tell you a little bit about our Western Mass Hub. Jane?
All right. Thank you so much, Michael. And thank you so much to all of you for being here and for having me. I feel like a bit of an interloper today being here in Brooklyn. I hope it's okay. I appreciate you having me. But this is really excellent to be here representing MVP, especially to this crowd, because you are all probably more familiar with MVP than many other folks that I get to speak to. I'm sure you've seen the signs, the lawn signs across the area, and the familiarity that everyone has with MVP in Northampton and in that area is, this is just quite excellent to get to present to sort of the hometown team. So thank you so much for having me. And what I really want to start off with is a real emphasis on the moment of urgency that we are in, and not to start off on a downer, but coming off of what we just went through in 2020 and in the past 4 years, I mean, it was an urgent election. It really felt like a life or death election. But even though we beat Trump, even though we won, the moment of urgency remains. So I just really want to position us in that the road we have over the next year, 2 years, 4 years, 10 years is a hard one. So we have a lot of work to do. And so we're going to start off by celebrating a little bit of what we won, and then talk a little bit more about what we need to do. So I do want to give some basic information, some background about MVP, even though some of you might be pretty well familiar. But here's just an array of statistics, a lot of what we accomplished in the last cycle. And to give just a little bit of background about MVP, although some of you might know this. So MVP was founded in 2015, 2016, leading up to the 2016 election by Billy Wimsatt, your local neighbor. And Billy saw that political money was just being used in all the wrong places. I mean, $14 billion was spent by the Democrats on the election last year, or throughout the cycle. So, and all of that money is going to ads, to poll consultants, to, all of these things that are not being invested in the communities. It's just going to the big money political machine. And so Billy knew that to fund the grassroots groups who work at that intersection of community organizing and electoral politics, that's the best investment that we can make. So these groups have been traditionally totally underfunded. But in the lead up to 2016, we moved $2.5 million. In 2018, in the midterms, we moved $14.5 million. And then in the 2020 cycle, 2019-2020, we moved $120 million. And that includes the Georgia special runoff. We were at about 100, a little over 100. And then Georgia, just put in so much more cash there between November and January. And to get there, we engaged tens of thousands of donors, just like you all, across the country, who through MVP were able to invest in communities and not candidates, because the key point of MVP is that we do not endorse candidates, we don't give to candidates, we don't give to the Democratic Party, we give to organizers and community groups across the country who are doing this extraordinary work. And those folks in battleground states across the country, they did the work to register historic numbers of voters, and they worked all throughout the cycle and are still there doing the work to inform, engage, motivate voters throughout the entire election season. And they really did an incredible, incredible job. So where we mostly invested in the last couple years were in these big 5 states: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Florida, and also in Georgia as well. And so this illustrates here some of the groups that we funded in each of these states. And we are working in many other states as well, but these were our big 5, what we call our sort of tier one states. And this illustrates some of the groups that we partnered with over the last few years. And these groups and the organizing that they do is absolutely at the center of what MVP is all about. It's about trusting local leadership, supporting leaders who are doing the work to connect with their communities. We are looking for groups, we're supporting groups that are led by Black folks, Indigenous, Muslim, Asian, LGBTQ plus communities, youth and students. I mean, these are the communities that we're here to support. And we're here to trust their leadership because they know what their communities need. And they did it. I mean, look at these margins though, they were close. And Florida, of course, remains a heartbreak, but it doesn't mean that we can't keep working so hard in Florida, because we just have to hold that line. So to better illustrate how we won and how we did it, I'm going to show a short video. It's just about 2 minutes, and it's a really lovely celebratory video, actually. And then I'll get a little bit more into our strategy, what we're calling our progressive decade strategy, which is our 10-year vision to create a progressive future where all of us can thrive.
In the 2020 election, our local grassroots partners were the ones who were risking their health and their lives engaging voters who were facing tremendous barriers to voting. It was their tireless work. They risked their own health during a pandemic, and they organized their own communities as trusted messengers, contacting tens of millions of Black voters, Latinx voters, Asian voters, Indigenous voters, Muslim voters, young voters. We really have built this movement together. And we could not have gotten, as a country, this level of historic voter turnout without this work.
Mr. Biden is the winner of the state of Pennsylvania.
There's really been that blue shift here in this key battleground state.
Biden has done what no other Democratic candidate has been able to do in some 28 years, turn Georgia blue.
Biden flips the state that hadn't voted for a Democrat since 1996 for president.
Former Vice President Joe Biden has been elected President of the United States.
Best day of my life, best day of the year, best way to conclude 2020.
At Movement Voter Project, we know that this movement is bigger than any election, even the most important election of our lifetimes. And the job's not done. We can't ever forget how close we came to losing our democracy and to losing the soul of our country.
The work after Election Day is to make sure that our issues and that our values are being prioritized.
We have to keep pushing for progressive candidates at the local, state, and national level. If we want the next decade to really be a progressive decade, then we need to double down on what's working.
All right. So what is working is the community power of these organizers, and we're here for it because these folks are here for their communities every single day, even in a pandemic, even in an uprising, even in economic uncertainty. Local organizers are here to help the right people get into office, and they're still around after the election to hold their electeds accountable and to win the policy changes that we all deserve. And that's the model that we're showing here. And I do want to name some of the organizers, name some of the groups that we're funding. One of my favorites is a group called Lucha, which is based in Arizona, that stands for Living United for Change in Arizona. And they have a great logo. It's like a Lucha Libre mask. And they started off as a small, scrappy group of young activists. They're mostly teenagers trying to oust Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who is that terrible sheriff in Maricopa County in Arizona, and fight against SB 1070, which was that heinous anti-immigration bill that was, in Arizona. And they fought against it and they won. And they are now, Lucha is now an absolute force in the state. They are putting props on the ballot. They recently were, a couple of years ago, were behind Prop 206 in Arizona, which ensured paid sick leave for all Arizonans and increased the minimum wage. And this is an incredible success story of organizing in action and power building. So now I'm going to bring us a little bit more to now and to the future. So we had a call a couple of weeks ago. We had a big national briefing. Maybe some of you were there, where Maurice Mitchell, who's an amazing, he was actually, you saw him in that last video and you'll see him again in another video. He's the leader of the Working Families Party. And he had this great thing about how there's no such place as national. There's no such place as federal. It's all local. It all comes to states. It all comes to communities. So I really like that as a perspective of thinking about national work, but really grounding it in community work. And I know there are some wise words that I heard right after the election when I was like, woo, it feels good to be post-election. Somebody who'd been doing this for a long time, they said, there is no such thing as post-election. It is all it's all pre-election. Sorry, I said that wrong. There's no such thing as post-election. It's all pre-election. So here we are right back in the thick of it. And where we are right now is that traditionally the party in power loses badly in the midterms. And so that is what we're up against. And that combined with some of the census stuff that was going on last week, the potential of redistricting going forward, there's a lot of unknowns and we have a really hard road ahead. In 2022, the House, the Senate, and swing state governors too are a must win. And what's happening now is that in 2021, our partners are advocating to deliver change in people's lives, from green jobs to police reform to voting rights. They're upgrading their efforts. And our formula is to win policy in 2021, then beat the odds in 2022. Because if we win in 22, our job is going to get much easier. But if we lose, that path is going to be so much harder. And the real point in our strategy is that we're looking well beyond even next year. Experience has taught us to invest early and to invest often and to invest big. Transforming the political landscape requires deep commitment over many years and to use all of our resources through multiple cycles. Apologies if you hear the siren of the New York siren in the background here. So moving on to our presidential map. These are our top tiers. Tier 1, like the big 5 that I mentioned before. We're keeping that tier 1 investment in those big 5 states, but we've added 3 more. We've added Texas, North Carolina, and Georgia. And those are our tier 1 presidential states where we will be investing the most. And again, back to what Marie said, there is no such thing, there's no place as national. All of this is local work, even though we're talking about a federal race. All right, so looking at the Senate. Ooh, there's a lot to do in the Senate. And what we accomplished in Georgia was extraordinary. I mean, I kind of still can't believe that we won both those seats, to be perfectly honest. And we all saw how it was voter registration and voter engagement that won us those seats. Everyone talks about Stacey Abrams and fair fight and the incredible work that she did. And it's true, it was that kind of organizing that really won us those seats. And I think that there was something about Georgia that really made that clear to so many people that maybe didn't even get that it was about the organizing, about the voter engagement, not so much about the candidates. And I do want to send love to a couple other vital organizations in Georgia that we were funding. There's an amazing group called Black Male Voting Project, who literally connected with every single eligible Black male voter in the state of Georgia, every single one. I think it's almost 1 million people. I mean, it was an extraordinary accomplishment. So that's the kind of organizing that's happening with the right kind of funding. And to further illustrate the importance of the Senate and the approach of this kind of funding that we're doing is that, those losses that we endured in Maine and Montana and North Carolina, all those Senate seats that we didn't win, for folks who gave a lot of money to those campaigns, like it didn't really pay off, right? Didn't feel that good to invest a couple $1,000s in those things and to, not really have anything to show for it at the end of the election. And what we call that is the sandcastle model. Where candidates build a huge thing, a huge infrastructure, a ton of money comes in. And then when they lose, it's all washed away. The brain trust, the infrastructure, none of it remains in the community. And so that's the power of the kind of work that we're doing, is that the investment in grassroots groups, in communities, is there all year round, whether or not the candidate that you were rooting for won or lost. So just to get a little bit more into the kind of strategy stuff that we're thinking of right now. So we have the chance to pick up 3 Senate seats in 22, right? In Pennsylvania with Toomey, in Wisconsin with Johnson, and in North Carolina with Burr. And there are 3 to defend. Warnock in Georgia, Mark Kelly in Arizona, which were both special elections that, they're now up again. And then in New Hampshire with Maggie Hassan. And by investing in local groups who are starting now to combat the voter suppression that's happening all over, as we just saw in Florida yesterday, which is just horrendous. And the more that those local groups are combating the voter suppression, registering and encouraging voters now to the polls and to keep communities informed and engaged, that's the work that we're supporting. So moving on to the House, oops, sorry, skip that. We almost have to treat the House as a mini version of the Senate. And, there's 2 scenarios here. It's a blowout and we lose 30 seats and we're screwed. Or it's a nail biter and we fight to keep it close, which is, really sort of the best case scenario of what we're looking at right now. It could come down to a couple House seats in a couple districts on a couple hundred votes. I mean, that's how tight these races can be. And this is a big map. You can see here, this is almost the whole country here. And redistricting is going to affect a lot of this. We don't know most of what the House maps are going to look like exactly right now. And so a lot of the strongest candidates haven't even thrown their hat in the ring because we don't even really know what the districts are going to be. So there's a lot that sort of remains to be seen, but we know that we are going to be investing in about probably 70 or 80 different House districts across the country, which means investing in groups in those localities so that there is support, organizing support to make sure that the right folks get into office. And, on a state level, we're looking at other scary scenarios as well, governorships, Secretary of State elections. If we look at Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, if they get trifecta control, or if they get a Republican governor and Secretary of State and all these other state local races, I mean, that puts us in an even worse position. We saw in Georgia and in Arizona, what's happening with their pseudo recount. The significance of the Secretary of State and of all of these state level positions are absolutely huge. So, this is all just to say the urgency is very real, and we can't really wait until the fall of 22 to start playing defense. All of this work needs to start happening now. So while much of this analysis that I've been talking about is geographic, and we also invest, in our tiers geographically, MVP is really about people. And what we fund is humans, and we fund communities. And that's really the core of the heart, I'd say, of what we do. And we have a number of funds, and this is all accessible on our website, where if you're just interested in organizing groups across the country that are Black-led, or groups across the country that are concentrating on environmental justice work, you can donate to the Climate Vote Fund. So it's just to say that we are concentrating both geographically and on an issue basis, which is really where we see the heart of this kind of work living. So I am going to show you one more quick video because I really want to put an emphasis on the organizers themselves. And you'll get to hear from Maurice Mitchell, who I mentioned, and from Myrna Orozco, who is our Director of State Partnerships at MVP. She's the person who's sort of overseeing all of the grant making. And you'll also hear from Alex Gomez, who is the Executive Director of Lucha, one of the groups I mentioned earlier. You'll see a little bit of reiteration of some of the slides that I just showed you today, but mostly I just really want you to hear from the leaders in the field and to leave us inspired to keep going, because there really is still quite a lot of work to do.
I want to talk a little bit about the stakes. You know, we should absolutely celebrate our victories, but this isn't the time to rest on our laurels.
At MVP, we know that winning in 2024 is not guaranteed. You can see in the lower half of this wheel what a lot of our local partners are doing right now. We want to make sure that we target every single race that might be competitive. The House, the Senate, state level races, starting now to build for 2024 and beyond.
So we need to have a sober reckoning and a sober analysis. The Republican Party are as dedicated and as motivated for their interests and their ideology as we are to ours.
We know that this work is so much bigger than any one organization, and we really deeply believe in working in partnership with all of our allies in a way that is greater than the sum of our parts.
In Arizona, we passed another proposition, 208, that is now taxing the rich. These are things that in Arizona were never thought possible, and we are making them possible through people power. We're looking to the next decade because we still have a fight in our hands. We had an incredible victory at a federal level, but within our state legislators, we still have a Republican trifecta.
So yeah, what we're left with is that there still is a lot of work to do, even though we won so big in Arizona. We flipped Arizona, but there still is a Republican trifecta who has all the power there. So we need to double down, get ready for next year, get ready for 24, and build that progressive decade for 10 years, 20 years to come. The progressive decade needs years of investment and consistent and considered investment. And MVP is stepping up to make multi-year commitments to many of these groups. We're making 4-year commitments, which for a lot of these groups is rare. You know, most nonprofits and community organizations, their funding comes piecemeal. You know, year by year, they have to, you know, ask for that grant over and over again. So we're committing 4 years right now to start, which is exactly what these groups need to be able to do the work for the long haul. You know, it's really going to take a lot to gain progressive victories. I've heard one of my favorite leaders, a woman from the Highlander Center named Ashley Woodward. Sorry, I think I've just got her name wrong. She says something like, "Fund us like you want us to win," which I just find so inspiring. I mean, that's really like, you know, that's what we need to make it happen. So as we ramp up for 2021, I'm excited to join this conversation with all of you. And I look forward to talking more about what we can all do together. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michael Kane, your local Northampton MVP expert, who is going to tell you a little bit more about the brilliant and amazing work of the Western Mass team.
Great. Thank you, Jane. Well, this is our crew. This is the Northampton hub. I should point out that there are 2 hubs in Massachusetts, one in the east, we're the one in the west. We started with a conversation between Mickey McKinley and Billy Wimsat, who's a Northampton resident and the founder of MVP, in late 2019. And we've been motivated ever since to be part of this extraordinary effort on MVP's part. So this is the group. We meet every Friday morning for our planning and to keep the momentum going. We thought we would submit these images to GQ and Elle and Cosmopolitan magazine and Vogue as possible cover shots for their magazines, but we haven't heard back from them. So we'll keep you posted if anything changes. So a little bit more granular about us. There's the 12 of us. As I said, we also work pretty closely with our fellow team out in the Boston area. We've raised about $1 million. We've got 2,400 people who have been at house parties, taken part in events, and that we consider to be part of our network. And in our support for MVP, we've done a whole range of different things around fundraising, which I just want to walk you through real quick. So if you can go to the next one, Jane. The monthly newsletter, we generally try to focus on one of the MVP grassroots to give our 2,400 people a sense about these groups, who they are, what they do. And this is an example of one of the groups. Sometimes what we've done is had an interview with one of the local executive directors, and that interview is then woven into our newsletter to give people a sense of what they do and the impact that they're having on the ground. We have other components of the newsletter, but it's a way for us to communicate to people here what's going on around the country in ways that Jane was just talking about. Next. House parties. We've done both in-person and virtual, about 100 of them. This one was one of the ones that we did in person. Those were really rewarding for us. We could engage with people, have a good back and forth. But when the pandemic hit, we switched almost seamlessly to virtual, and we've been able to keep that momentum going. So we've had 100 house parties, and we've had people from 37 states and 3 countries that have participated in our house parties and events. Next. This was one of our fundraising ideas. A woman, Barbara Bigelow from our group, is a runner. And she thought a neat idea would be for us to have something that's a fundraiser for MVP during the week of the Republican National Convention in August of 2020. So she organized groups of runners and organized groups of running groups around the country, each committed to doing a 5K race and use it as a fundraiser for MVP. It was a lot of fun, a lot of people participated, and I think we raised somewhere around $15,000 to $17,000 for that event. Next. The 2 women featured here, Annie Patterson on the left and Mary Witt on the right. Mary's from the group O-Tones. Annie Patterson with her partner Charlie Blood have been doing concerts around the Valley for many, many years. And they are also the co-authors of that book, Winds of the People. So they've done a number of fundraising concerts, lots of fun. We hope they'll continue to do that. Next. We also were approached by a woman in Montague who was having a birthday, and she wanted to turn it into a dance party and also a fundraiser for MVP. So we worked closely with them, had the dance party, a little over 100 people, and we made $25,000 for MVP at that event. There's plans to do something again like that in the future, and we're looking forward to it. The next one, a favorite of mine. I'm sure most, all of you know of Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley from the Boston area. We wanted to have an event that would bring in somebody with national exposure and someone who really understands what the stakes were in that election and the importance of grassroots organizing. And Congresswoman Pressley agreed to be a speaker in that event. I also should point out that part of what worked to get her involved in this is that she and Jane went to the same high school in Chicago. So it was nice to see the 2 of them connect. Anyway, we had about 150 people on that Zoom call from around the country and raised $50,000 for that event. Before I close, I just want to also mention that we did a number of listening parties with people in our network. We wanted to give people a chance to tell us what really worked for them for MVP, why they invested and supported the work, and what we can do to improve and further our fundraising. So those listening groups were really important to us, and it was a nice way for us to communicate with people locally. So let me stop there, turn it back over to Jane, and then we'll turn it to Mark for question and answer.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Michael. So yes, I would really just encourage everyone to reach out either to me or to Michael if you're local and want to get more involved in, the organizing team that is really just the most incredible group of people. I feel really honored to be the liaison between the Western Mass team and MVP. It's really a joy for me to get to create this community with them and to get to share this political work with such a dedicated group of volunteers. And I really encourage you to reach out to Michael and learn how to get involved with that. And if you have any questions about MVP, about anything I spoke about today, any questions about donor advising, how to donate, how we work, how we vet groups, all those kinds of questions, happy to answer them now or to answer them later. Feel free to reach out to me. And and also want to let you know that I am happy to send along both the slides that I presented and links to the videos. So if you want to dive a little deeper into the presentation today, I can send that out to everybody who was part of this talk today. So there you go.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Mark?
Yeah. Yes, so we have two questions. First one is from Rachel. Did I hear at the beginning that MVP is a nonpartisan group? Can you explain whether that's true and how it's true, since we're talking about Democratic Party victories and talking about Republicans as they? Honestly, I'm progressive and texted loads of people in the presidential election to get out the vote. I'm just curious about the use of the term nonpartisan.
I don't know if did I use the term nonpartisan, because that's not usually a term that I would use. MVP is a C4, which is an overtly political organization. But I think what you were picking up on there was that we don't give to the Democratic Party in terms of who we fund. We're funding organizers and community groups. We're not funding candidates directly, and we're not funding the Democratic Party. We're obviously not funding the Republicans either, but we're not funding the Democrats. We're not funding the Republicans, and we're not funding the Democrats directly. I mean, we're funding democratic work, and we're funding organizations to support, almost overwhelmingly Democratic candidates. Sometimes they're independent candidates or they're on the Working Families Party line or something. But we don't necessarily say that we're a democratic group in that sense of nonpartisan, but really we overtly say we're a progressive group, straight up. Obviously, our whole strategy is the Progressive Decade strategy. But in terms of funneling money to the party, that's the real distinction. We're not donating money to the Democratic Party. I hope that clarifies.
We have a question from Naomi. How do you select and not select organizations and issues?
Absolutely, yeah. So another thing that I'm happy to send along to everybody is we have a whole document, which is also linkable on our website, which is our vetting document, which outlines how we select our groups. One really key point in our vetting process that's a really great way to sort of illuminate a little more of how MVP works is we have a team of staff, about a dozen folks on MVP staff who we call state advisors. And those advisors almost live in their state and are the point of connection among the entire ecosystem of groups that we fund in a particular state. So for example, Corina Uribe, who is the Arizona state advisor, she started off as an activist herself, on the ground with those folks from Lucha, like trying to fight against Joe Arpaio. And what her role now for MVP living in Arizona is she acts as like sort of an umbrella organization almost. She is the center point for all the different groups in Arizona, and to make sure that all those groups are talking to one another and not doubling down. But the main thing is that she's so deeply embedded in Arizona organizing that she knows who the good groups are. So, she knows, she's able to even let us know about a brand new group that's bubbling up, like, oh, hey, there's these organizers over here, maybe we want to like support them and help them really rise up. But because of the relationships that our state advisors have within their own communities and localities, they're able to do vetting at a level that's really deep and really personal. So that's just one layer of it, but we do have a very written out level of criteria based on past success, based on working well with other groups in, in an area, based on, and we ask for reports and annual reports, but and numbers and whatnot. But I can send you all the documentation that outlines it a lot more, a lot more kind of nerdily than the story that I'm giving now.
I just want to chime in. That was an excellent question, Naomi. And some of us on the local hub also wanted to find out about that as well. So to varying degrees, each of us has sort of looked into that. And when we appreciated and understood the amount of work and the value that MVP puts in the vetting process, it really convinced us that they were a serious and an effective organization. But I also want to add that the level of strategic analysis that's an ongoing part of MVP's work is also hugely important to us. So this isn't a static picture or a snapshot of any given key state or swing state. This is ongoing so that it gives MVP the ability to understand where the capacity issues are versus where the strategic emphasis and important is. And that whole process of reflection and dialogue and analysis is what convinced many of us that this is an organization worth our supporting.
Thank you, Michael. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, the nimbleness I think that we're able to do is really key, absolutely. And I see some questions. Is it okay for me to just read the questions here in the chat, Mark? Okay,
sure.
Great.
Yeah.
I see that somebody asked about funds raised, how much goes to staff. So 100% of donations of donor gifts to Movement Voter Project go directly to the groups, 100%. Our operating funds, our like MVP's operating budget is funded entirely separately by a handful of donors who are extraordinarily generous and support the work at this kind of baseline level. But any funding that we ask of donors to give to MVP, 100% of that goes to the groups. And given that we raised about $120 million last year, and that our operating budget was just over 5 million, it's actually a pretty good, we raised a lot for a pretty small company or small organization on a pretty limited budget.
Here again, just to add to that, in our group, we understand that some of those big donors and large contributors, they supply a fair amount of the money that MVP gets. But they also want to see evidence that there's grassroots support for the work of MVP. So when you take a look at just us in Massachusetts here, there's 2,400 people roughly that we've engaged in our network. I think the number in greater Boston area is something like 5,000 to 7,000 people. So just in our state alone, there's 8,000 or 9,000 people that have been part of this process. So they see that as evidence of MVP really trying to make an effort to make this a broad-based movement, both at the grassroots level in the swing states, but also within their support base.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's see here. So a question about partnerships and groups like Indivisible. And yes, we do very much partner with a number of organizations that are, on a similar track as us. We're closely aligned with Swing Left. We work closely with a group called Walk the Walk and Flip the Vote, which were two huge groups that popped up in the last year to, promote exactly this kind of giving, grassroots giving, as opposed to candidate focused giving. We don't actually have a direct relationship with Indivisible specifically, but we also see that all of these kinds of conversations within the progressive space as being absolutely vital to one another. We think that this kind of partnerships and interconnection and support of one another is what's going to help us win. If we're trying to silo and be competitive about volunteer time or money, it doesn't serve anybody. So, I actually, it's very funny, Billy knew about Indivisible very, very early on. And he actually, I think, helped them with their initial seed funding to get Indivisible going, but that was even sort of outside of his MVP hat. And that actually segues into a question that somebody asked about how Billy came up with the idea. I sure don't want to speak for Billy, especially if he watches this at some point later. But Billy was involved in so many interesting activist organizations before he came up with MVP. And I think it was really just his depth of experience of being so involved in grassroots work and just seeing this massive political machine and how little of the funding was going to the organizers who deserved it the most. So, it really just, I think, came quite organically from his experience working in the field for so long and having as many connections as he did to rather large dollar donors. And so he was able to talk to some of the right people in the progressive funding space and, invited them to start moving money toward this kind of organizing as opposed to the Democratic Party into candidates. And, here we are $120 million later. It's pretty extraordinary. Sorry, Mark, I'm just going to keep going with some of these questions
Sure.
that I see on the chat. Paid staff right now, our total staff is about 40 folks. We had a number more before the election, but obviously after the election, things constrict a little bit and folks move on to other opportunities or, decide to go on vacation for 6 months because it was a heck of a hard year. So right now, I think we're at about 38 folks who are on staff. That's about the number that comes to our all team meetings. So yeah, and it's some contractors as well, but we've got about almost 40 people working, and that's in communications, in legal, in tech support, in our state advisors team, our donor team. These are the different. We also have a capacity building team. So we have a lot of different folks doing different things around this work.
There's a question there from Marion, but it's incomplete. So what I think I'm going to do is, if it's okay, I want to make a brief announcement, and Marion can either complete that question or once I'm done, we can, Nina can, or people can unmute themselves and ask a question out loud, if that's okay.
Great.
As I mentioned earlier, everything Northampton Neighbors offers to its members is free. So we have to be creative and work hard to raise funds for the organization. We hope you'll make a contribution to Northampton Neighbors of any size. And we have a special offer starting this month. Northampton Neighbors was given a collection of historic, large headline issues of the New York Times and the Daily Hampshire Gazette, covering the biggest news stories over the last 60 years, starting with the assassination of JFK in 1963 and ending with the Obamacare Supreme Court victory in 2015. If you donate to Northampton Neighbors beginning this month, we'll show our appreciation by sending you one or more issues from this collection. Details, including dates and topics, will be listed soon on our website. Just ask for the story or date you want, and if we still have it, it will be personally delivered in a protective clear sleeve to your home in Northampton, Florence, and Leeds by a board member of Northampton Neighbors. You can donate online at our website, www.northamptonneighbors.org, with either a credit card or PayPal. And so Nina, do you want to do whatever you need to do? So here, yeah. Do you want to read that one, Jane?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, how many more grassroots groups? Well, a lot of the groups that we aren't supporting yet might not even exist yet, because that is so key to the kind of work that we're doing, especially in areas where we didn't invest as much last year. In say Texas or in North Carolina. I mean, obviously we did a lot in Georgia for the runoff, but North Carolina and Texas weren't our tier 1 states last time round, but they are now. And depending on different House races and stuff. So yeah, the possibility is there could be so many more groups in states that we don't even know about yet. But really the main thing is that we're sticking with all the groups that we were donating to before, that we want our support to be as consistent as possible. And some groups, they actually closed up shop, it's possible, or they just decided to, change tack. But we're here to stay consistently funding these organizations that we've been dedicated to in the past. I wish I could say a number of how many more, but in a way, I hope that it's as many as possible, because our main goal really is to expand this work, to expand the level of community organizing that's happening around the country. So I don't have an exact answer, but it's really, we hope to be as expansive as possible.
So Nina, can you do whatever you need to do so we can see if there are questions people want to ask out loud? I'm switching my view. If there are, wave your hand, either unmute yourself or Nina can unmute you.
I see Naomi there.
Linda Desmond.
Right, but we need to unmute them.
Ah, yeah, Naomi's good.
Naomi, you're unmuted.
Okay, I have two sort of follow-up questions. And the first is, one of the questions was how much of the funds go to pay staff members? And you answered that in terms of the national organization, but you didn't answer it in terms of the local organizations. And presumably, or is all the local organizational work volunteer, or are they paid staff members?
Yeah. All the folks in Western Mass are volunteers. All of our local teams are volunteer teams. Yes.
Yeah. So that's true all over the country, all the Georgia groups. Wow.
Oh, no. Let me make it. No. Let me make a very strong distinction between volunteer groups like Western Mass, which is what Michael is a part of. And those are volunteers who are working on behalf of MVP to fundraise. But when I'm talking about groups, when I'm talking about the groups that we're funding, these are the organizers on the ground.
Right.
Those folks, we're funding them. We are, MVP is essentially a grant-making organization, really, at its core. So we're funding all those groups, but their budgets and their stuff is theirs. They're running their nonprofit however they choose to run it. And they're staffing and paying or whatever, but we're funding that. Oftentimes we're funding their general operating, which can go to staffing expenses and can go to, things as mundane as like buying a bunch of new printer cartridges or, paying rent on another office.
Right.
But, yeah.
So I was just wondering how much actually went to staff, because those are included as staff. But I mean, that makes sense. But
yeah. It's hard to say because the grant making is different for each group and in each locale. Sometimes a grant is for a very specific campaign, like, we're granting them $20,000 so that they can, work for a certain ballot initiative, and they need to go print out all the signature stuff and they need to hire people to do that.
Right.
But sometimes it's a general grant. So the grant could go to the group for them to, spend the money on however they need, really, just to keep them going. And especially right now in this kind of post-election moment, a lot of the money that's being funneled to organizations, because we're actively grant making still, each month we're funding different groups around the country. And, for a lot of those groups, it really is about keeping people on staff. The election ends and how do people keep their jobs? Because so much of the money just went away, right, after November. So it's paramount to us to be able to make sure that organizers are funded, fed, housed, keeping their jobs.
That's interesting. That's great.
Yeah, Linda.
Hi, thank you. That's all I'm going to say right now. But I do have a question. So, what is MVP's strategy to address the voter suppression that's happening all over the country right now? The legislation regarding voter suppression. It's
Absolutely.
Scary.
It's terrifying. It really is. And I mean, even just in the last week, it seems like it's gotten even more dire. Really, I think the bulk of the work to fight against those evil bills is happening with grassroots groups that we're funding. If you think of a group like Fair Fight, we didn't fund, they had tons of money. A lot of people gave Fair Fight money. We did not need to fund them. But Fair Fight was a group that we funded, a few years ago. And New Georgia Project, which is an organization that Stacey Abrams founded before she founded Fair Fight, is one of our core anchor groups in Georgia. And they are doing legal work to fight against, the stuff happening in Georgia. They're doing on the ground organizing, and they're taking every tactic possible to fight against this. And it's communications, it's messaging, it's legal, it's, on the ground, talking person to person, getting groups of people to show up at the State House and to protest, so it's any tactic at hand we're taking. And we really do feel that that work is best upheld by the groups on the ground in those states who have relationships with their legislators, who have relationships with their communities, who are able to stand up against these terrible, terrible bills.
Thank you.
So there's one last question. Would you encourage, this is from Kathleen, would you encourage people to donate to MVP over individual candidates?
Yeah, that's an amazing question to end on, because that is who we are. That is exactly what we do. And that is absolutely the core of the messaging that I try to get across to everybody, is investing in candidates. You know, I mean, sure, donate to a candidate who you love. Maybe you went to high school with them, or maybe it's in your hometown, or maybe it's somebody who you just find particularly compelling and fantastic, who you would love to see in office. You know, I for sure donated to candidates and will continue to do so. But the biggest, by far, bulk of my giving, in fact, 98% of it, is going to grassroots groups on the ground, because that investment in the community, it's an investment in a community. It's not investing in a candidate who's going to disappear in November, whether he wins or loses. It's an investment in groups on the ground who are here year round, advocating for their communities and fighting for what matters to make a better world.
And the storyline from many of us at the local hub is that we spent decades going to other states, doing phone banking, doing canvassing, working for political candidates, and many of us will continue to do that. But we all felt this hollow feeling that after the campaign was over, there was nothing left in place, nothing to support the communities. And this MVP model is the thing that convinced us this is where we want to put our energies.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised that Michael brought his typical clarity and humanity to this presentation. When Michael recommended Jane as a speaker for this, he said to me, she's a powerhouse. Now I can see that that's true. I know, of course, that the organizations that you support, thank you for your work. I think citizens who care about the preservation of democracy, thank you for your work. And Northampton Neighbors definitely thanks you for being willing to come and spend time and speak with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
He's the program director for Northampton Neighbors. This guy is the head of local fundraising or organizing for the Movement Voter Project. She's involved on the national level.
I think we're all set, folks.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.